The stars above Sector 9 had always been quiet. Too quiet, some would say, but no one in the Galactic Empire had ever thought much of it until the patrol vanished. 3 fully armed Imperial cruisers, equipped with advanced scanners, shield tech, and veteran crews, were sent to monitor the border near the Sol system, where the newly discovered species, humans, were beginning to develop. Earth had only recently been flagged as a Category 3 developing world, and while their tech was primitive by galactic standards, their rapid advancement had caught the attention of the Empire's observation corps. The cruisers were meant to gather routine data and establish long-term monitoring systems around the solar perimeter. Yet, within 6 hours of arrival, all contact was lost. Not a single signal, not a single emergency ping. One moment the ships were on screen, slowly moving near Pluto's orbit, and the next, gone, as if the void had swallowed them whole. Initial thoughts pointed to natural causes, a black hole surge, a spatial fold, or even a flare from a rogue star. But those possibilities quickly unraveled when the escape pod arrived. It drifted into orbit above the Empire's outermost relay station on the edge of the Vulcan belt. The pod was old, damaged, and carried strange energy signatures. Inside was Lieutenant Serac, a junior officer from the missing fleet. His body was bruised, his breathing uneven, and his eyes unfocused. Medics pulled him from the wreckage, only to hear him repeat the same sentence over and over. They weren't supposed to have ships like that. It wasn't possible. They shouldn't exist. No amount of calming, scanning, or questioning could shake him from his daze. Every time someone asked what he saw, his eyes would go wide, and he'd whisper about a shape in the darkness, a shadow that moved without thrusters, a hull that shimmered like liquid glass. He spoke of energy weapons that bent around shields, of systems shutting down before the crew could react, and a voice, calm, human, broadcasting a message in perfect galactic common, warning them to leave. Grand Admiral Zeltan, known for his cold logic and battlefield brilliance, was called to oversee the case. At first, he dismissed the lieutenant's ramblings as trauma-induced hallucinations, a product of a deep space breakdown. He reviewed the last known data packet sent by the patrol. It showed clear, calm space. No movement, no sign of hostiles. But the Admiral's instincts, finely tuned over decades of war and politics, told him something was off. Even the energy readings around the pod were strange, fluctuating in ways Imperial science couldn't explain. Despite this, the official report labeled the incident as a space-time fault, closing the investigation. Unofficially, however, Zeltan ordered the incident classified under Code Black. Only a handful of command-level officers were given access to the pod's logs and the lieutenant's recordings. He replayed the audio dozens of times in private, focusing on the moment when the lieutenant screamed and the signal cut. Just before the static overtook the transmission, there was a faint sound, barely a whisper of something, mechanical yet organic. Not a language, but a presence, something aware, watching, waiting. That night, Zeltan stood alone on the command bridge of the dreadnought Vornax Eternal, staring out into the stars, his eyes locked onto the coordinates of Sector 9. In all his years of command, he had never feared a developing world. But now he felt something he hadn't felt in decades: unease. The humans were not supposed to have ships like that. Not yet, not ever. So if they didn't build it, then who did? And why was it protecting them? Inside the Imperial data vault on Station Archon 4, analysts worked around the clock, scanning through every bit of human communication, satellite feed, and military broadcast. After the mysterious disappearance of the patrol in Sector 9, the Empire demanded answers, and all attention turned to Earth. But what they found was confusing. Earth had nothing, at least nothing on record. Their technology was still in its early space age. Most of their satellites were for weather tracking, communication, or crude orbital surveillance. Their space agencies were civilian-led, their military forces bound to the surface, or at best, low orbit. There were no signs of advanced propulsion systems, no mass drivers, no energy shields, and no record of any ship leaving Earth capable of interstellar travel. On paper, humans were nowhere close to building anything that could challenge even a single Imperial corvette, let alone erase an entire patrol. But then came the deep scan data, pulled from long-range probes that had been monitoring the solar system quietly from afar. Hidden in the static of corrupted readings, in areas where sensors had briefly gone dark, something strange was detected, an energy distortion unlike anything in the Empire's archives. At first, they thought it was a natural anomaly, until one analyst enhanced the scan and revealed a shape buried in the void. It wasn't just a reading, it was a ship. But not a ship any of them could understand. Its structure shifted constantly, as though it was adapting to space around it. It didn't reflect light the way metal should. In fact, it didn't seem to reflect anything at all. It looked like a void in the shape of a vessel. Its size varied depending on the angle it was observed from. Sometimes it measured 300 meters in length, sometimes over a kilometer. The surface of the object gave off signals that resembled both organic and synthetic materials. Its energy signature didn't match anything human or any known galactic race. It operated in silence, without thrusters, without heat trails, without anything a normal ship would need. It simply appeared and disappeared across scans, moving through space like a shadow that bent the rules of physics. The xenologists were called in, experts in alien biology, tech, and ancient language. But even they were lost. One described the vessel as a living machine, while another insisted it was a remnant of an extinct precursor species long believed to have vanished from the galaxy. As the Empire dug deeper, old legends resurfaced, stories of machines that could bond with species, that chose their users rather than were built by them. Most thought those tales were myths, but now, with this ship sitting at the edge of Earth's system, untouched and unseen by human satellites, it didn't seem so impossible anymore. Even stranger was its behavior. It didn't attack unless approached. The long-range probes that entered its area were silently disabled, never destroyed. The ones that kept their distance were ignored. This suggested intelligence, patience even. It was as if the ship had a mind of its own, or someone inside it who knew exactly what they were doing. The Imperial Council grew restless. Grand Admiral Zeltan studied the latest images, his expression more focused than ever. He saw the outlines of the unknown vessel and felt something stir in his chest, a feeling he hadn't known in years: uncertainty. A ship that didn't follow the rules, hiding near a species that shouldn't have access to anything remotely close to that level of power. If Earth had truly built this thing, then the Empire was already too late. But if they hadn't, then the bigger question was far more troubling. Why was it protecting them? And who, or what, had given them the key? The Galactic Empire, now facing whispers of fear and confusion among its inner circles, decided to change its approach. If brute force couldn't solve the mystery, diplomacy might. The High Council approved the launch of the Valsari Dawn, a sleek diplomatic ship equipped with high-frequency translators, peaceful signaling lights, and an experienced negotiation crew. Their mission was to enter the Sol system, make peaceful contact with Earth's leaders, and, more importantly, find out the truth behind the strange unregistered vessel that had appeared and vanished like a ghost. The Valsari Dawn transmitted peaceful greetings in over 100 galactic languages as it neared the edge of human space, broadcasting intentions of cooperation and mutual understanding. No weapons were powered, no threats were made, just calm, clear attempts to open a dialogue. For several hours, everything remained silent. The Earth below showed no signs of detecting the ship, and the alien vessel, if it was even still nearby, remained hidden. Then, without warning, the lights inside the diplomatic cruiser flickered. Their long-range communications glitched, and before the crew could react, every system shut down. For 13 seconds, the Valsari Dawn floated silently in the void, powerless and cold, until systems came back online just long enough to send a final transmission. What arrived at Imperial Command was distorted, corrupted with static, but one part played clearly: a voice, human, calm, steady, and firm, spoke through the static as if speaking directly to the highest powers of the Empire. It said only this: "Do not approach again. This is your only warning." Then the feed went dark. No further signals, no coordinates, no return. The Velsari dawn never came back. In that moment, silence fell across the war room of the Empire's core fleet. Grand Admiral Zeltan stood motionless, jaw tight, hands behind his back as the message looped again and again on the command screen. Advisors murmured among themselves. Some thought it was a bluff, others believed it to be a hijacking, or that the humans had somehow reverse-engineered enough alien tech to intercept and distort the signal. But the Admiral knew better. There was no threat in the voice, just certainty. Whoever or whatever spoke wasn't asking. It was warning. Zeltan had fought wars across 9 sectors, seen planets fall and rebellions rise, but never had a developing species delivered such a clear, confident message to the most powerful military force in the galaxy, and then made it stick. The diplomatic channel had been burned. Earth, by action or by Guardian, had just made its position known. The Empire had been embarrassed. A peaceful ship, under Imperial seal, had vanished without a trace, and now there was proof that Earth, or the unknown ship near it, had the power and precision to strike without being seen. Across the Empire, news spread in whispers, then waves. Military command was split. Some demanded retaliation, others urged caution. Scientists wanted more time, more data, but time was no longer a luxury. The Empire could not afford to look weak. For centuries, it had crushed uprisings with a flick of its fleets, silenced threats before they became risks. But now a single voice, from a single world, had challenged its authority and left no room for doubt. And as the stars continued to burn above, one truth began to settle into every Imperial mind. Earth was no longer just a developing world. Whether by its own hand, or by something far older and far stranger, it had just sent a message the galaxy would never forget. The Empire had been warned, and warnings, in the history of war, always come before something greater. The Empire had been patient long enough. After the disappearance of the diplomatic ship and the mysterious warning that followed, patience was no longer an option. Grand Admiral Zeltan received direct orders from the High Council. Earth was to be brought under control immediately. The objective was simple: launch Operation Thunderclamp, a show of absolute power. 10 of the Empire's most advanced warships were chosen, each equipped with precision orbital cannons, energy shields, and elite crews. Their mission was not to destroy Earth, but to overwhelm its defenses, seize the unidentified vessel, and remind the galaxy of what happened to those who dared challenge Imperial rule. As the fleet jumped into the Sol system, all sensors scanned for signs of the hidden ship. At first, there was nothing unusual. Earth's satellites picked up the fleet and scrambled signals across their networks, but no human ship launched to defend. The battle fleet continued its approach, passing the cold blue orbit of Neptune, preparing to enter range for the first phase of subjugation. That's when it happened. Without warning, space behind the fleet rippled like water disturbed by wind. From the darkness emerged a ship unlike any the Empire had ever seen. It made no sound, no energy surge, no hyperspace signature. One moment, the stars were visible, and the next, they were gone, blocked by a massive obsidian shape that stretched across the black like a silent leviathan. 3 times the size of the Imperial flagship, it hovered behind the fleet like a predator studying its prey. The surface of the ship shimmered strangely, as if covered in shifting glass or a living skin. It had no visible weapons, no lights, no name, and yet it radiated a presence that made even the most hardened captains fall silent. Before the fleet could react, the first wave struck, not with fire or destruction, but with precision pulses of pure energy. A strange hum filled every ship, followed by sudden, total system failure. Lights dimmed, engines died, weapons refused to activate, and shields collapsed without resistance. Communication between ships turned into static. Emergency backups wouldn't start. Even artificial gravity began to fail in some sections. It was not an attack designed to kill. It was a demonstration of control. 10 warships, each more powerful than anything Earth could build in centuries, now drifted helplessly in orbit near Neptune. Crews scrambled in panic, trying to restore power, while their ships spun slowly, powerless in the void. The enemy didn't fire again. It didn't need to. The message was clear. From the Imperial command deck, Admiral Zeltan watched helplessly as every display went black one by one. The unknown ship had knocked out his entire fleet without a single shot fired. He could feel the weight of the silence pressing on him, heavier than any explosion. His officers, trained to keep calm under fire, now whispered in disbelief. Some looked at the Admiral for orders. Others stared out at the black shape with wide eyes, unsure whether to be afraid or in awe. No ships were destroyed. No lives were lost. But the damage was far worse than physical. The Empire had just been humbled, not by an armada, not by a rebellion, but by a single ship that didn't belong to any known power, that answered to no government, and that now stood like a silent guardian between Earth and the Empire. The fleet was stranded. The message from before now echoed in every mind. Do not approach again. They hadn't listened. And now they knew. Whatever force watched over Earth was not bluffing. It was watching, waiting, and far beyond their understanding. And worst of all, it hadn't even tried hard. After the humiliating failure of Operation Thunderclamp, the Empire's pride was wounded, but its curiosity grew even sharper. The mysterious black ship had demonstrated overwhelming power without causing a single casualty, a tactical move that was as terrifying as it was precise. Rumors flooded the inner chambers of the High Council. Some called the vessel a myth reborn. Others whispered it was a weapon left behind by the ancient precursors, a race believed to have vanished millions of years ago. Desperate for answers, the Empire turned to its most secretive branch, Intelligence Command. Using advanced espionage drones, deep code hackers, and black-budget agents, they launched a quiet operation to gather data directly from Earth's hidden networks and deep space signals. It took weeks, but finally, the truth surfaced, buried deep within encrypted human research logs and intercepted communications between secret facilities. What they discovered changed everything. Decades ago, during a routine ice drilling expedition in Antarctica, a small team of Earth scientists stumbled upon a strange metallic object buried deep beneath the frozen surface, far older than any known civilization. At first, they believed it to be a meteorite or some geological anomaly, but the material was unlike anything on Earth, and strange energy signatures pulsed faintly beneath its shell. A quiet cover-up followed. Governments erased records, moved the team, and sealed off the area, creating a covert research site far from the public eye. As years passed, they unearthed more of the object, revealing it to be a vessel, ancient, massive, and perfectly preserved under the ice. But it wasn't just any ship. It was something alive in ways Earth's scientists couldn't explain. It responded not to tools or machines, but to thoughts, emotions, presence. It allowed itself to be explored only when approached with curiosity, not control. Instead of trying to tear it apart and reverse engineer its technology, the humans did something no other species had ever attempted. They listened. The vessel, partially sentient and layered with complex biomechanical systems, began to respond. Lights activated, corridors opened, and slowly it began to awaken. It didn't speak through words, but through symbols, projections, and dreams experienced by the research team. It was a precursor ship, left behind long ago, waiting not for someone powerful, but for someone compatible. And somehow, it had chosen humanity. Over time, select humans were able to connect with the ship's systems, not as pilots, but as partners. The ship did not operate by command, it cooperated. It shared knowledge in fragments, unlocking technologies that had never existed on Earth. Energy manipulation, spatial displacement, adaptive shielding, and advanced AI that worked in harmony, not control. With each new discovery, Earth's technology leaped forward in secret. Facilities were built to study and protect the vessel, but the ship remained loyal to the team it had bonded with. It allowed itself to be moved to space only after trust had been built. The Empire now understood that the ship above Neptune wasn't built by humans, but it wasn't stolen either. It was awakened and, more importantly, accepted. That revelation disturbed the Empire deeply. If such a ship had chosen humanity, then the balance of power across the galaxy was already shifting. What was even more dangerous was how quickly humans were learning. With every cycle, their understanding grew. Their scientists adapted fast. Their thinkers connected dots most species took generations to grasp. They weren't just using ancient tech, they were evolving with it. For the Empire, this was worse than war. It was the beginning of something new, something uncontrollable. A rising species, guided by the wisdom of the oldest machines in existence, unbound by fear and no longer alone. Humanity had found a guardian in the ice, and in doing so, they had become something the galaxy hadn't seen in eons. A true wild card. The Imperial High Council was in chaos. For the first time in over 1,000 years, there was no unanimous voice, no single direction that commanded the galaxy's forces. Panic spread through the council chambers like wildfire. Some of the more conservative members, old and steadfast in their belief of imperial superiority, insisted that the only way forward was war. Earth had challenged the Empire's might, and it needed to be crushed before it became an uncontrollable threat. A full-scale invasion of the Sol system was the only answer, they argued. But others were more cautious, their voices wavering with doubt. They knew that the mysterious ship that had crippled an entire fleet wasn't something to underestimate. It wasn't just a ship. It was a weapon beyond anything the Empire had ever faced. And more disturbingly, the humans aboard it had the power to use it. The fractured voices of the Council echoed across the vast chamber, clashing in the cold silence of space. Seltan stood among them, his once unwavering confidence now overshadowed by the reality of the situation. He knew that sending another fleet to Earth was a gamble, one that could end in total destruction, but something had to be done. No empire could survive being publicly humiliated by a species that should have been far beneath it. He spoke with authority, calling for action, but in the pit of his stomach, he felt the weight of something new, uncertainty. Just as the debates began to heat up, an unexpected communication arrived. A single human ship had entered Imperial space, its silhouette visible through the viewing windows of the command tower. It was a diplomatic ship, but no weapons were visible. No military escort, just a single vessel, calmly drifting toward the heart of the Empire's most secure region. For a moment, every soul in the council room fell silent. The human envoy had arrived, and for the first time since the conflict had begun, the galaxy's most powerful leaders found themselves at a loss. The ship docked without resistance. Inside the war room, Imperial guards took positions, but no one moved to stop them. The human diplomat was escorted in, dressed in the simple garb of his people, but his presence commanded the attention of everyone in the room. He was calm, too calm. His eyes scanned the council, acknowledging each member with a quiet nod. No fear, no bravado. He wasn't here to fight. He was here to speak. The moment he opened his mouth, the entire room seemed to still. "We didn't ask for this power," he said, his voice clear and unhurried. "But we'll use it to ensure we're never underestimated again." The words hit like a thunderclap, sharp and resonant, echoing across the cold walls of the chamber. A ripple of surprise spread through the council, followed by a thick, uneasy silence. For a brief moment, it was as if the universe itself paused, waiting for a response. Seltan's eyes narrowed, his instincts warning him to remain cautious, to demand more, to push for answers. But there was something in the human diplomat's tone, in the quiet confidence with which he stood before them, that made every imperial leader pause. The words were not a threat, but they weren't an apology either. There was no malice, no arrogance, just a quiet declaration that resonated with the weight of something greater than any individual in the room could grasp. It was clear. Humanity wasn't asking for permission to exist in the galaxy. They weren't seeking approval. They had already made their decision. They were here to stay, and they would no longer be ignored. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Galactic Council listened, not as conquerors, not as those who could impose their will with a fleet of ships or a show of strength. They listened because they realized, far too late, that the galaxy had just been forced to recognize a new force. Humanity had no grand military, no empire to wield, but they held something far more dangerous: the ability to adapt, to learn, and to harness powers far beyond their understanding. A ship had chosen them, not for their might, but for their potential. And now they stood as equals in the eyes of the most powerful empire in the galaxy. And the empire, despite its might, was left to wonder. Had they just been outplayed by a species still in its infancy? The Galactic Empire, once the unquestioned ruler of the stars, was now forced to bend. After weeks of tense negotiations, the High Council, broken by internal division and fear, finally signed a non-aggression pact with humanity. The terms were simple yet profound. Earth's growing power could no longer be ignored or suppressed. The Empire had no choice but to recognize it. In return for peace, humanity would remain neutral in imperial affairs and refrain from any hostile actions, at least for the time being. But that wasn't the real shift. The most shocking part of the agreement was what came next. Humanity was invited to join the Galactic Council as full members, no strings attached. It wasn't a gesture of goodwill, it was a surrender of sorts. The Empire was no longer the only seat at the table. The Council had to accept a new force, one they had underestimated from the very beginning. Humanity, a species still in its relative infancy compared to other galactic powers, now stood as equals. But it wasn't on their terms. The humans set conditions of their own. They would join the Council, but only on their terms. And the other galactic leaders, though visibly uncomfortable, had no choice but to comply. They understood the implications of this. Humanity wasn't just joining the galaxy, they were shaping it. Once the deal was struck, the human diplomats left, their envoy confident in the new order they had helped create. What no one could see, however, was what was happening behind the scenes. Humanity wasn't simply joining the Council to sit at the table and talk. They were preparing. In secret, Earth's leaders began to share their advanced knowledge, sparingly, carefully, with only those who had treated them with respect. It was subtle at first, small technological exchanges, knowledge about energy efficiency, medical advancements, and new materials. But it was enough to make a difference. Those who had seen humanity as nothing more than a weak, backward species began to notice something change. Their technologies began to improve. Their economies began to grow at a faster rate. The Empire, having signed the treaty, couldn't help but watch as the galaxy shifted under their feet. Humanity had learned quickly, far quicker than anyone expected, and now they were teaching. But not everyone received the same treatment. Humanity wasn't about to trust those who had once doubted or threatened them. The old imperial allies who had dismissed Earth as insignificant were left in the cold. Their advances remained stagnant, their understanding of the new technologies limited. Only those who had shown kindness and respect were allowed to tap into the vast wealth of knowledge that Earth had unlocked. The message was clear. Humanity had arrived. They were no longer the naive, forgotten species they had once been. They were no longer content to play by the rules of others. Humanity had embraced its place in the galaxy, not just as an equal, but as a leader. They would guide the future, shaping the course of galactic politics, science, and culture. And most importantly, they had learned the most important lesson of all. Power was not always about brute force or grand fleets. True power lay in the ability to adapt, to grow, to evolve faster than anyone else could. The Empire, broken and bruised, could no longer pretend that the galaxy was theirs alone. The new galactic order was being written, and this time, humanity wasn't a footnote. They were the authors. The Empire's rule was over, and the stars now belonged to a new force, a force that had learned from the past and was poised to lead the future. The universe had changed, and humanity was at the helm.